The match struck against the dry oak banister. Its sulfur hiss cutting through the humid night air like a secret finally confessed. Evelyn watched from the shadowed edge of the porch as flames licked the edges of her words, curling them into ash that danced upward on the breeze from the Atlantic. In that instant, she knew Riley's family had won, but the girl with the wild chestnut curls and ocean blue eyes had already etched herself into Evelyn's bones, a tattoo of salt and sunlight that no fire could erase. Evelyn Harper was 17 that summer of 1999. Her skin bronzed from endless days hauling crab traps along the brackish shores of Wilmington, North Carolina. The air hung heavy with the scent of magnolia blossoms and tidal decay, a perfume that clung to her like the faded sundress she wore, its hem frayed from too many barefoot runs through the salt marshes. She had come to this coastal town with her mother, fleeing the ghost of a father who preferred whiskey to fatherhood, seeking solace in the rhythm of waves that crashed against the pilings like unanswered prayers. Wilmington was a place of faded grandeur, where antebellum homes sagged under Spanish moss and the Neuse River wound lazy through streets lined with live oaks, their branches gnarled as old regrets. It was here, amid the humid haze of early July, that Evelyn first glimpsed Riley Voss. Riley was the daughter of the town's unspoken enforcer, Harlan Voss, a man whose shipyard empire built fortunes on the backs of weathered hands but whose heart was forged in the rigid iron of Southern Baptist doctrine. At 16, Riley moved through the world like a storm trapped in human form, her laughter a thunderclap that echoed across the boardwalk, drawing crowds of wide-eyed locals to the ice cream parlor where she slung cones with a wink and a quip. Her hair caught the sun in unruly waves of chestnut, and her eyes held the restless blue of the sea just before a squall. She wore cut-off jeans and tank tops that bared the freckles dusting her shoulders, a defiance wrapped in the casual grace of someone who had never questioned her place until Evelyn arrived. Their meeting was unremarkable at first, a collision of elbows in the cramped aisles of the local bookstore, where Evelyn sought refuge from the relentless heat. A dog-eared copy of The Awakening tumbled from Riley's grasp, landing at Evelyn's feet like an invitation. "You dropping hints or just testing my reflexes?" Riley had grinned, her voice carrying the soft drawl of the Carolina Lowcountry, warm as cornbread fresh from the oven. Evelyn, cheeks flushing under the weight of those blue eyes, had bent to retrieve it, their fingers brushing in a spark that neither could name but both felt deep in their chests. From that moment, the summer unfolded like a secret garden gate creaking open, petal by petal. They spent stolen afternoons wandering the dunes of Wrightsville Beach, where the sand shifted underfoot like shifting loyalties, and the horizon blurred the line between sky and water. Evelyn spoke of her mother's dreams deferred, of cities she imagined pulsing with lights brighter than the fireflies that lit their evenings. Riley confessed her father's iron grip, the sermons that branded love as a narrow path lined with thorns, and the ache she felt when she looked at the girls in her class, their laughter stirring something forbidden in her soul. "It's like I'm drowning in plain sight," Riley whispered one evening, her head resting on Evelyn's lap as they lay amid the sea oats, the stars emerging like hesitant witnesses. Evelyn traced the curve of Riley's jaw with trembling fingers, her touch a promise forged in the quiet roar of the tide. "Then let's swim out together," she replied, her voice steady despite the terror coiling in her gut. As weeks bled into one another, their bond deepened into something fierce and unspoken, a love that bloomed in the hidden coves where egrets fished at dawn and the world felt vast enough to hold them both. They shared kisses that tasted of salt water and stolen peaches, urgent and tender, beneath the canopy of palmettos that whispered approval in the wind. Evelyn wrote letters in the margins of her journals, words she never sent but carried like talismans. "You are the light bending through the prism of my days, refracting colors I never knew existed." Riley, in turn, sketched Evelyn in the pages of her notebook, capturing the arch of her brow, the way her lips curved in quiet defiance, as if art could anchor what faith threatened to uproot. But the Voss family home loomed like a sentinel on the bluff overlooking the inlet, its white columns gleaming under the moon like teeth bared in warning. Harlan Voss had built his legacy on certainty, on the unyielding belief that deviation was damnation, and his wife, Clara, echoed his convictions with the fervor of a woman who had long ago traded her own voice for domestic peace. Riley's younger brother, Theo, idolized his father, parroting sermons at the dinner table with the zeal of youth. When whispers of Riley's absences reached Harlan's ears, fueled by a nosy neighbor who spied the girls from her veranda, the reckoning came swift as a nor'easter. It began with questions, then accusations, Harlan's voice booming through the clapboard walls like cannon fire. "Who's this Harper girl poisoning your mind?" he demanded one night, slamming a fist on the oak table that had witnessed generations of Voss suppers. Riley, cornered in the kitchen with flour-dusted hands from baking biscuits to appease her mother, felt the air thicken with judgment. "She's just a friend, Daddy," she lied, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. But Harlan's eyes, sharp as crab claws, saw through her. He followed her the next day, parking his truck at the edge of the marsh where Evelyn waited, her sketchpad open to a half-drawn portrait of Riley laughing. The confrontation unfolded in the slanting light of afternoon, the air humming with cicadas that seemed to mourn in advance. Harlan strode through the reeds, his face a mask of righteous fury, seizing Riley's arm with a grip that left bruises blooming like ink under her skin. Evelyn froze, her pencil dropping into the mud, as Harlan's tirade washed over them. "This ends now. No daughter of mine will consort with filth." The word landed like a stone in still water, rippling horror through Evelyn's veins. Riley wrenched free, tears carving tracks through the dirt on her cheeks, but her father's hold on her spirit was ironclad. "Go home, Evelyn," Riley choked out, her voice breaking on the waves. "Please just go." Evelyn stumbled back to the rented cottage she shared with her mother, the marsh grass clawing at her ankles like accusatory fingers. That night, as thunder rumbled in from the east, she poured her grief onto paper, letters sealed with wax from a candle that flickered like her resolve. "My dearest Riley, the stars we counted are still there, waiting for us to reclaim them. Hold on to this light until I can reach you." She mailed the first one the next morning, slipping it into the blue box at the post office with hands that shook from withdrawal. The responses never came. Instead, weeks later, Evelyn learned the truth from a mutual friend, a boy named Jasper who worked the docks and owed her a favor for mending his torn net. "Harlan gathered 'em all up," he said, his voice low in the dim light of the bait shop, the smell of chum turning Evelyn's stomach. "Made a bonfire out back. Said they were temptations from the devil himself." The image seared into her, flames devouring her confessions, the ink of her love curling into smoke that rose toward an indifferent sky. Riley had been sent away to a cousin in Raleigh, her father claiming it was for straightening out, but Evelyn knew it was exile. The wound festered through the fall, as Evelyn's mother packed their meager belongings into the old Ford, and they fled north, chasing rumors of better jobs in the textile mills of Virginia. But the scar followed, a hollow ache that echoed in empty mailboxes and dreams where Riley's laughter dissolved into ash. Evelyn carried the silence like a stone in her pocket, turning it over in quiet moments, wondering if forgiveness was a myth or merely a horizon too distant to touch. The summer had promised rebirth, but all it delivered was the bitter truth. Love in its rawest form could be burned away, leaving only the ghost of warmth on chilled skin. In the years that followed, Evelyn's life became a mosaic of half-measures, pieced together in the gray drizzle of Portland, Oregon, where she had landed after a string of rootless jobs, from barista in a fog-shrouded cafe to clerk in a used bookstore that smelled of mildew and forgotten stories. Portland suited her in its quiet eccentricity, with its bridges arching over the Willamette-like veins carrying the city's melancholic pulse, and its neighborhoods of craftsman bungalows nestled under evergreens that whispered secrets to the wind. At 25, she had a studio apartment above a Vietnamese noodle shop, its walls papered with postcards from places she longed to visit but never did, each one a placeholder for the adventures Riley had once promised. The pain had dulled to a chronic throb, manifesting in the way Evelyn avoided mirrors, lest she see the girl who had dared to love so fiercely and lost everything for it. She dated sporadically, women with kind smiles and steady hands, like Mara, the graphic designer with laugh lines that crinkled like autumn leaves, but intimacy felt like trespassing on sacred ground. "You're holding back," Mara had said one rainy evening, as they shared takeout pho on Evelyn's threadbare couch, the steam rising like ghosts between them. Evelyn had nodded, unable to explain the vault in her chest where Riley's memory resided, locked and labeled "Do Not Disturb." When Mara left for good, citing the walls Evelyn couldn't scale, it confirmed what she already knew. Some fractures ran too deep for plaster. Work became her anchor, first as a volunteer at the Oregon Historical Society, sorting yellow documents in the basement archives where the air was cool and timeless, scented with the faint vanilla of aging paper. There, amid ledgers of lost homesteads and faded photographs of stern-faced pioneers, Evelyn found a fragile peace. The archives were a sanctuary of the discarded, a testament that even the most erased stories could be exhumed and given breath. She imagined the voices of those long silent women who had loved across lines of class and creed, their diaries hinting at passions coded in metaphor, much like the letters she had once written. By 30, Evelyn had clawed her way into a full-time role, curating exhibits on marginalized voices, queer histories tucked into the folds of American exceptionalism, stories of boarding houses in 1920s Harlem or clandestine meetings in Greenwich Village speakeasies. Each artifact she handled felt like a proxy for her own unspoken grief, a way to mend the rents in the world's fabric one thread at a time. But the nights were harder, when the city lights blurred through her rain-streaked windows, and loneliness crept in like fog off the river. She would pull out the one relic she allowed herself, a pressed seashell from Wrightsville Beach, its ridges worn smooth as a worry stone, and trace its curves, remembering the press of Riley's palm in hers. The breakdown came unannounced on a crisp October morning in 2012, when Evelyn was 35 and the weight of unhealed wounds had begun to bow her shoulders. She had been promoted to head curator, tasked with launching a new digital archive dedicated to LGBTQ+ narratives from the American South, a project born from her own shadowed past, a bid to illuminate what families like the Vosses had tried to incinerate. The office buzzed with interns and grant proposals, but Evelyn felt adrift, her focus splintering like fractured glass. During a routine meeting as she presented slides of scanned love letters from 1950s New Orleans, missives between two women whose words echoed her own with eerie precision, a wave of vertigo crashed over her. The room tilted, the projector beam slicing through the air like a scalpel, and suddenly she was 17 again, standing in the rain outside the Voss family gate, pounding on the wrought iron until her fists bled, screaming Riley's name into the storm. Colleagues' voices blurred into white noise, and Evelyn crumpled to the floor, sobs racking her body as if exhuming decades of suppressed fury. "I'm sorry," she gasped when she could speak, but the damage was done. Whispers followed her through the halls, pity masked as concern. That night, alone in her apartment with a bottle of cheap bourbon and the relentless patter of rain on the roof, Evelyn confronted the abyss. Her life was an archive of absences, a collection of what-ifs curated to avoid the truth. She quit the next day, tendering her resignation with a note that cited personal reasons, and fled Portland for the raw solitude of the Pacific Northwest coast. Renting a cabin in the driftwood-strewn beaches near Cannon Beach, where haystack rocks rose from the surf like ancient guardians, Evelyn spent weeks walking the Tittlines, letting the cold waves numb her feet and the wind scour her thoughts. The ocean, vast and indifferent, became her confessor. She hurled questions into its roar. Why did they burn us? Why couldn't love be enough? And received only the rhythmic crash of foam, a reminder that some pains were tidal, ebbing but never fully receding. Emerging from that exile, Evelyn resolved to rebuild, not as a curator of others' stories, but as architect of her own healing archive. She returned to Portland with a grant proposal burning in her laptop. The Luminary Project, a non-profit repository for queer ephemera from rural America, focused on the South's hidden heartbeats. "We preserve not just paper," she wrote in her pitch, "but the light that dares to flicker in the dark." Funding came from unexpected quarters, a foundation dedicated to social justice, moved by her raw vulnerability in the application video, where she spoke of letters turned to ash and the embers they left behind. The Luminary Project took root in a converted warehouse on the east side of the Willamette, its brick walls softened by climbing ivy and windows that caught the golden hour like stained glass. Evelyn hired a small team. Lena, a sharp-witted librarian from Atlanta with a penchant for blues records, and Theo, coincidentally a young trans archivist whose quiet intensity mirrored her own. Together they built shelves of reclaimed wood, each plank sourced from fallen coastal cedars, symbolizing renewal from ruin. Donors trickled in, contributing boxes of diaries, Polaroids, and cassette tapes. Fragments of lives lived in the margins, from Appalachian hollers to Delta juke joints. For Evelyn, the work was cathartic, a daily ritual of resurrection. She scanned faded valentines inscribed with pet names like My Moonbeam, their ink faded but defiant, and felt the stirrings of kinship with those anonymous lovers. Yet, the project unearthed her own ghosts. Handling a bundle of 1980s letters from a North Carolina couple separated by conversion therapy, Evelyn's hands trembled, the parallels too sharp to ignore. "This is why we do it," she told Lena one evening, as they catalogued under the hum of fluorescent lights, the river's murmur seeping through the walls. To say their names, even if ours were silenced. But the true fracture came internally, in the quiet hours when the archive emptied and Evelyn lingered alone, poring over submissions that echoed her loss. One night, triggered by a donor's tale of familial rejection, she shattered a glass frame holding a vintage photo of two women dancing at a 1970s barn raising, the shards scattering like accusations across the floor. Kneeling amid the debris, tears streaming, she whispered to the empty room, "I can't keep burying you, Riley. Not anymore." The admission hung in the air, heavy as fog, marking the nadir of her unraveling. A woman adrift in the very sanctuary she had built, questioning if healing was possible when the wound refused to close. As the project gained traction, invitations poured in. Panels at queer film festivals in Seattle, workshops in Austin's vibrant scene. Evelyn traveled, her suitcase a portable archive of note cards scribbled with mantras. Light persists. Stories endure. But the road only amplified the echo chamber of her solitude. In a San Francisco hotel room after a keynote on reclaiming Southern queer narratives, she dreamed of Wilmington. The Voss bonfire raging anew, Riley's silhouette vanishing into the smoke, her hand outstretched but untouchable. Waking sweat-soaked, Evelyn stared at the ceiling's water stains, mapping constellations of regret, and vowed to confront the past before it consumed her archive's fragile flame. Little did she know, across the continent, in the very soil where their love had taken root, Riley Voss was stirring from her own long slumber, drawn inexorably to the beacon Evelyn had unwittingly lit. The drive from Raleigh to Wilmington felt like traversing a fault line, each mile marker a tremor in Riley Voss's chest. It was 2015 and at 34, she gripped the steering wheel of her sensible Subaru with knuckles white as bleached shells, the radio tuned low to a classic rock station crooning Springsteen's Thunder Road, as if it knew her secrets. The low country unfolded around her in a tapestry of pine barrens and brackish inlets, the air through the cracked window thick with the brine of memory. Riley had returned to North Carolina after years in Atlanta's bustling anonymity, called back by her mother's frail voice on the phone. "Your daddy's gone, honey. Time to come home." Harlan Voss had passed in his sleep the previous winter, felled by a heart attack as unyielding as the man himself. The funeral had been a spectacle of Southern propriety, brass hymns echoing through the First Baptist sanctuary, eulogies praising his unwavering faith, while conveniently omitting the iron fists that had ruled their home. Riley had flown in from her job as a social worker, her life a carefully constructed facade of stability. A tidy apartment in Midtown, a partner named Sam who baked sourdough and asked few questions about her past. But standing graveside under a canopy of live oaks dripping with resurrection fern, as clods of red clay thudded onto the casket, Riley felt the earth's indifference mirror her own buried rage. Clara Voss, diminished now to a wisp of lace and lavender water, had clung to her arm throughout, whispering apologies that fell flat as unleavened bread. "He only wanted what was best," she murmured, her eyes averted to the horizon where the Cape Fear River met the sea. Riley nodded, the old script automatic, but inside the dam cracked. Best for whom? For the empire of denial Harlan had built, brick by judgmental brick? For the daughter he had shipped off to pray away her sins, leaving her to navigate adolescence in a cousin's sterile guest room. Bible verses pinned to the walls like barbed wire? The inheritance was modest, a stake in the dwindling shipyard, the family home on the bluff, and a lockbox of papers Harlan had hoarded like trophies of conquest. Riley had planned to sell it all, liquidate the ghosts and retreat to Atlanta's safety. But curiosity, that old traitor, drew her to the attic on a humid July afternoon, the air stagnant as a forgotten pond. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the gabled window, illuminating crates labeled in her father's precise hand. Taxes 1980 to 1990. Deeds personal. It was the last that undid her. Tucked beneath ledgers of unforgiving arithmetic lay a charred remnant, a corner of envelope, its edge blackened as if kissed by flame, the ink smudged but legible. To Riley from E. Harper. Riley's breath caught, a hook in her throat, and she sank to the floorboards, creaking under her weight like a confession. The memory flooded back. The summer of '99. Evelyn's touch, a lifeline in the suffocating grip of her father's world. They had been fireflies in jars, glowing defiantly until the lid slammed shut. In the weeks that followed, Riley became an archaeologist of her own erasure. She pored over the attic's detritus by flashlight, evading Clara's concerned knocks, unearthing not just the burned fragments but Harlan's meticulous records, receipts for counseling sessions in Raleigh, where pastors had drilled doctrine into her like nails into flesh. One entry, dated August 15, 1999, chilled her. Disposal of correspondence. Purified by fire. Praise God. The bonfire. Riley remembered the acrid smoke wafting through her window that night, mingling with her sobs as she clutched the bedsheets, willing Evelyn's face to materialize from the shadows. The collapse came piecemeal, disguised as competence. At work in Atlanta, Riley's caseload of at-risk youth blurred into her own unresolved youth. She second-guessed placements, her empathy fraying at the edges. Sam noticed first over a dinner of grilled okra and cornbread, his brow furrowed like plowed earth. "You're drifting, Ree. Like you're half here, half somewhere the rest of us can't follow." She deflected with a smile, but the words lodged like burrs. Nights devolved into insomnia, Riley pacing her apartment to the tick of the wall clock, replaying the porch scene. Harlan's grip on her arm, Evelyn's green eyes wide with betrayal as she backed away into the marsh twilight. She sought therapy, a nondescript office in Buckhead where Dr. Ellis, a soft-spoken woman with wire-rimmed glasses, coaxed the story from her like thread from a spool. "Grief isn't linear," Ellis said after the third session, as Riley described the bonfire's glow reflected in the river. "It's a river itself, twisting, flooding when you least expect." Riley nodded, but the metaphor rang hollow. Her grief was no gentle current but a riptide, pulling her under with visions of what might have been. Shared sunrises over the dunes, Evelyn's laughter weaving through magnolia-scented air. The breaking point arrived in September, during a routine home visit to a teenage client named Jordan, a queer kid from rural Georgia whose parents mirrored Harlan in their fervor. As Jordan recounted hiding love notes under floorboards, Riley flashed to her attic discovery, her vision tunneling. "They'll find them," Jordan whispered, voice cracking. "And then it'll all burn." Riley fled the trailer, vomiting into the azaleas, her composure shattered like cheap porcelain. Back in Atlanta, she called in sick for a week, holing up with takeout and true crime podcasts, anything to drown the internal roar. Sam tried bringing chamomile tea and gentle probes, but Riley's walls, built over decades of survival, proved impenetrable. "I need to go back," she confessed one evening, the skyline twinkling beyond their balcony like distant fireflies. "To Wilmington. To understand." Sam, ever the steady harbor, squeezed her hand. "Then go. But come back to me, okay? We build bridges, not burn them." Their embrace lingered warm but tentative, a reminder that love required tending, not just endurance. Riley's return to the coast was solitary, the Subaru laden with unresolved questions. She walked the old paths, the boardwalk where she and Evelyn had shared cotton candy that melted sticky sweet on their tongues, the inlet where they had skipped stones, each plunk a vow. The town had changed, condos sprouting like mushrooms along the waterfront, hipster cafes replacing bait shops, but the salt air carried the same ache. At the post office, she lingered by the blue box, tracing its slots with a finger, imagining Evelyn's letters sliding in, hopeful and doomed. Clara, sensing the shift, finally broke her silence over sweet tea on the veranda, the Spanish moss swaying like pendulums of regret. "I knew about the letters," she admitted, her voice frail as onion skin paper. "Your daddy. He thought he was saving you. But I should have stopped him." Riley's throat tightened, a storm brewing behind her eyes. "Saving me from what, Mama?" "From loving someone who saw me." Clara's gaze dropped to her lap, where her hands twisted a handkerchief into knots. "From hell," he said. "But looking back, I wonder if we weren't the ones stoking the fire." The admission cracked something fundamental in Riley, a fissure through which forgiveness might one day seep, but not yet. She drove to Wrightsville Beach at dawn, the sky bruising purple over the Atlantic, and waded into the surf fully clothed, the cold shocking her system like absolution. Waves tugged at her jeans, pulling her deeper, and for a moment she let them, imagining Evelyn beside her, their hands linked against the current. Surfacing, gasping, Riley made a pact with the horizon. She would find Evelyn, or at least the echo of her, and lay her ghosts to rest. Back in the family home, amid the attic's relics, Riley fired up her laptop, the screen's glow casting her face in ethereal blue. A search for Evelyn Harper yielded fragments. A byline in a Portland queer history journal. A LinkedIn profile listing her as founder of the Luminary Project. The website loaded slowly, its homepage a serene image of sun-dappled archives, shelves brimming with stories reclaimed from oblivion. Riley's heart stuttered. There in the About section, Evelyn's photo. Older, silver threading her auburn hair, but those green eyes unchanged, holding the quiet fire of survival. Tears blurred the screen as Riley read Evelyn's bio. Driven by a personal loss to preserve the voices silenced by fear. The pieces aligned like constellations emerging from cloud cover. The letters, the bonfire. The decades of silence now bridged by this digital lifeline. With trembling fingers, Riley composed an email, words spilling like tidewater. I found the ashes, Evelyn. And now I've found you. Can we talk? She hit send at midnight, the whoosh echoing in the empty house, and waited, breath held, for the reply that might shatter or save her. Evelyn's pulse thundered, a drumbeat against her ribs, as she scanned the message. It was spare, almost clinical coordinates of pain laid bare. The attic discovery, Harlan's death, the weight of unspoken decades. I've carried you like a bruise that never fades, Riley wrote. This archive. It's a lighthouse I didn't know I was sailing toward. The closing was a plea wrapped in hope. If you're willing, I'd like to visit. To listen if you'll let me. She closed her laptop with a snap, the room spinning as if the river had risen to claim the shore. Lena glanced up from her desk, eyebrow arched in that knowing way of hers. Ghost in the machine? She quipped, but Evelyn waved her off, fleeing to the rooftop terrace where the city sprawled below, a patchwork of bridges and breweries under a sky heavy with impending rain. Leaning on the railing, Evelyn let the wind whip her hair, tasting salt on her lips though the ocean was miles away. Riley. Alive seeking. The girl who had been her salvation now knocking at the door of her hard-won peace. Denial came first, a reflex honed by years of self-preservation. Delete it, she thought, imagining the message vanishing like smoke. But curiosity, that persistent tide, pulled her under. She spent the afternoon in the archive's depths, pulling files on Carolina queer histories, tracing threads that might lead to Riley's life post-exile. Whispers of a social worker in Atlanta. A woman who advocated for outcast youth with a ferocity born of experience. The portrait coalesced. Riley tempered by fire into something resilient. Her edges softened but her core unyielding. By evening, Evelyn's resolve cracked. She drafted a reply in the margins of a notepad, words scratched out and rewritten until the page resembled a battlefield. I've built this place from the ruins you left, she began, then softened. From the ruins we both endured. The invitation slipped in almost unbidden. Come in November. The leaves are turning, and so perhaps am I. Hitting send felt like casting a line into abyssal waters, uncertain if she sought fish or the thrill of the unknown. Riley's acceptance came swift, a bomb and a blade. I'll fly in the 12th. Nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Evelyn laughed, a rusty sound that echoed off the warehouse beams, startling Theo from his digitization station. For the first time in years, anticipation stirred, warm as sunlight-piercing fog. The intervening weeks were a whirlwind of preparation and procrastination. Evelyn rearranged the reading room, propping fresh flowers, coastal roses, their petals blush pink as a Carolina dawn, on the oak table where they would talk. She confided in Lena over coffee at a Pearl District cafe, the steam curling between them like unspoken fears. What if it's just nostalgia? Evelyn murmured, stirring her latte into froth. Lena, ever the pragmatist with a poet's heart, reached across the scarred formica. Or what if it's the sequel you didn't know you were writing? Give it air, Ev. Let it breathe. Internally, the conflict raged like a Nor'wester. Nights brought dreams of the marsh. Riley's hand slipping from hers, the bonfire's roar drowning her cries. Mornings dawned with resolve frayed. Evelyn pacing her apartment, the pressed seashell clutched like a rosary. She penned unsent letters in her journal, pouring out the litany of losses, the jobs quit in quiet despair, the lovers who came and went like seasonal rains, the archive that healed strangers but left her hollow. You were my first light, she wrote. Did I dim yours? Riley's arrival coincided with Portland's first frost, the air crisp as starched linen, nipping at Evelyn's cheeks as she waited at PDX arrivals. The terminal thrummed with reunions, hugs, laughter, the flash of signs, but Evelyn stood sentinel, her wool coat buttoned to the throat, scanning faces with the intensity of a curator verifying provenance. Then there she was. Riley striding through the crowd, suitcase in tow, Her chestnut hair cropped short in a style that framed her face with defiant grace. The blue eyes locked on Evelyn's and time folded, the decades compressing into a single suspended breath. They embraced awkwardly at first, arms tentative as if testing fragile ice, then fiercely, Riley's chin hooking over Evelyn's shoulder, her scent, faint jasmine and airport coffee, stirring sediments long settled. "You look like you stepped out of a photograph," Riley whispered, pulling back to study her, thumb brushing a silver strand from Evelyn's brow. Evelyn swallowed, voice thick. "And you? You're the girl from the dunes, but with stories in your eyes." The words hung. A bridge extended over chasms. The drive to the archive wound through Selwood's tree-lined streets, leaves crunching under tires like brittle memories. Conversation flowed in fits, weather, the flight's turbulence mirroring their nerves, then lulled into companionable silence, the radio filling gaps with Lucinda Williams' husky drawl. At the warehouse, Evelyn led Riley inside, the door's bell tinkling like wind chimes in a breeze. "Welcome to the luminary," she said, gesturing to the shelves aglow with artifacts. A quilt stitched with coded messages from 1940s Texas lovers, a locket engraved with intertwined initials. Riley's gaze roamed, hungry, settling on a display case of burned correspondence, singed edges preserved under glass, a nod to their shared scar. It's you," she said softly, turning to Evelyn. "All of it." They settled at the oak table, tea steaming between them, and the floodgates creaked open. Riley spoke first, voice steady but laced with gravel. The Raleigh exile, prayers that felt like chains, the slow awakening in Atlanta where she found community in dive bars and support groups. "I dated men for years thinking it would stick," she confessed, fingers tracing the table's grain. "But it was like wearing someone else's skin. Scratchy. Wrong." Evelyn listened, her heart a drum of empathy and ache, then shared her odyssey. The flight north, the Portland reinvention, the archive as exorcism. "I built this to say what we couldn't," she admitted, voice cracking on the edge of tears. "But seeing you here, it's like the stories came home." Riley reached across, her hand covering Evelyn's, the touch electric, grounding. "I'm sorry for the silence. For letting him win." The afternoon deepened into evening, words weaving a tapestry of what-ifs and might-have-beens, laughter punctuating grief like stars piercing cloud. They walked the riverfront after, the Willamette reflecting city lights and shimmering coins, arms brushing in accidental intimacies that sent sparks along Evelyn's nerves. "Portland suits you," Riley said, pausing by the Hawthorne Bridge, wind tousling her hair. "Strong. Rooted." Evelyn smiled, the first genuine one in days. "And you make it feel like home." That night, over dinner at a cozy bistro in the Alberta Arts District, plates of hazelnut-crusted salmon and greens tossed with local foraged mushrooms, the barriers thinned further. Riley recounted Theo, her brother, now a mellowed accountant in Charlotte, who had apologized in a drunken voicemail after Harlan's death. "I was just parroting Dad. Forgive a fool." Evelyn shared tales of her mother, long gone to cancer but forever the dreamer who taught her to chase horizons. Wine loosened tongues and confessions flowed. Riley's work with queer youth, channeling her pain into advocacy. Evelyn's fleeting romances, each a pale echo of their summer blaze. As they parted at Evelyn's apartment door, the air charged with possibility, Riley lingered, her blue eyes searching. "Tomorrow?" she asked, voice soft as fog. Evelyn nodded, pulse racing. "Tomorrow." The door clicked shut, but sleep evaded her, the bed a tangle of sheets in anticipation. Riley, a continent away no more, had crossed the threshold. Not as ghost but flesh and blood, her presence a key turning in locks long rusted. In the days that followed, their reunion unfolded like a slow-blooming camellia, petals unfurling in the crisp Pacific air. Mornings began at the archive, Riley volunteering her hands to catalog, her social worker's eye spotting narratives in the chaos of submissions. Afternoons wandered Portland's veins, the Saturday market's bustle, where artisans hawked silver jewelry etched with queer symbols, Forest Park's trails, where ferns carpeted the forest floor and Douglas firs towered like ancient confidants. Evenings stretched into heartside talks at Evelyn's, vinyl spinning tales of heartache. Joni Mitchell's Blue a soundtrack to their thawing. Yet, beneath the warmth undercurrents swirled. Riley's visit stretched from a week to 2, her return ticket unused, but doubts nipped at Evelyn's heels. Is this real, or just the gravity of gravity? She wondered, watching Riley laugh at a Theo anecdote over takeout pad thai. One dusk, as they picnicked on the banks of the sandy river, cottonwood fluff drifting like snow, Evelyn voiced it. What happens when Atlanta calls? Riley's face shadowed, the water's gurgle filling the pause. I'm not running this time, she said finally, lacing fingers with Evelyn's. But I need to know we're building, not just reminiscing. The question lingered, a seed planted in fertile soil, as their connection deepened. Shared glances holding heat, touches lingering like promises. For the first time, Evelyn glimpsed the horizon beyond survival. A life where light wasn't borrowed but owned. November's chill deepened into December's embrace. Portland streets slick with rain that pattered against the luminaries' windows like impatient fingers. Riley's presence had woven itself into the archive's rhythm, her laughter a counterpoint to the rustle of pages, her insights sharpening exhibits like a whetstone on steel. Yet, as the solstice approached, the weight of understanding pressed upon them, demanding the harvest of truth's long fallow. Evelyn felt it in the quiet moments. Riley's gaze lingering on a display of familial rejection letters, her jaw tightening like a muscle in its shell. The conversation they had skirted since her arrival crested one gray afternoon, as they worked side by side in the conservation lab, gloved hands coaxing stains from a 1960s diary with soft brushes and eraser crumbs. The entry they uncovered spoke of a mother's silent complicity in her daughter's institutionalization, the words blurring under Evelyn's vision. Like your mama, she murmured, more to the page than Riley. The air thickened, the dehumidifiers hummed the only witness. Riley set down her tools, peeling off the nitrile gloves with deliberate slowness, the snap echoing like a verdict. Clara wrote me last week, she said, voice even but threaded with strain. After I told her about you. About us back then. Evelyn turned, heart a stone skipped across still water, waiting for ripples. Riley pulled a folded letter from her pocket, creases worn from rereading, the paper thin as resolve. She says she's sorry. That she burned one herself before Daddy got to the rest. Thought she was protecting me from everything. The admission landed soft but seismic, cracking the facade of Riley's poise. Evelyn crossed the room in 2 strides, drawing her into an embrace that smelled of archival paste and unspoken absolution. Protecting you from love, Evelyn whispered, her cheek against Riley's temple. From us. They sank onto the lab stool, Riley's head bowing to Evelyn's shoulder, the dam finally breaching. Sobs came ragged, years of deference dissolving in salt, and Evelyn held her through it, murmuring nonsense comforts. It's all right, I've got you. Her own eyes stinging with shared sorrow. In the aftermath, they retreated to Evelyn's apartment, the space transformed by Riley's touch. Throw blankets draped over the couch, a half-finished puzzle of Oregon's coast on the coffee table, pieces fitting like fractured confidences. Over mugs of mulled cider, steam curling like hearth smoke, Riley unfolded the letter's contents, her voice steadying with each word. Clara's script was spidery, apologies laced with regret. I was raised to believe love like yours was a storm to weather through, not a light to cherish. I see now the ashes I helped scatter. Riley's fingers trembled on the page. She wants to meet you. Says it's time to make amends. Evelyn's throat closed, a vine of vines. Forgiveness offered from the hand that had fanned the flames. Do you want that? She asked, searching Riley's face, those blue eyes now rimmed red but clear as tidal pools. Riley nodded, slow as sunrise. For her. For me. For the girl I left behind in that house. The decision settled between them, heavy as winter fog, but laced with the promise of release. Preparations for the trip south consumed them, a ritual of reckoning. They booked flights to Raleigh, Evelyn's first return to Carolina soil since the Exodus, her stomach nodding at the thought of magnolias and marsh winds. Riley coached her through the family dynamics, Clara's frailty, Theo's awkward warmth, while Evelyn shared stories of her mother's grace under fire, lessons in bending without breaking. In stolen moments their bond deepened, hands clasping across kitchen counters as they packed, lips brushing in tentative kisses that tasted of cider and courage. No rush, no reclamation of lost youth, but a gentle exploration, like cartographers mapping new terrain with reverence. The flight south was turbulent, clouds boiling below like the churn in Evelyn's gut, but Riley's hand in hers anchored, thumb stroking circles of calm. Wilmington greeted them with deceptive mildness, December sun gilding the live oaks, but the air hummed with undercurrents, the nooses murmur a whisper of old wounds. Clara's home, once a fortress, now sagged gently, its porch swing creaking in welcome. Theo arrived first, broader now with middle age, his embrace bearish and contrite. "Sis," he rumbled then to Evelyn, "heard a lot. Glad you're here." His eyes, Harlan's eyes, held no thunder, only the quiet plea of a man who had outgrown his echoes. Clara waited in the parlor, swathed in a shawl the color of faded hydrangeas, her face a map of lines etched by time and silence. She rose on bird-bone legs, extending a hand that Evelyn took, feeling the fragility beneath. "Miss Harper," Clara breathed, voice quavering. "Evelyn. Thank you for coming." They settled in wingbacks by the fireplace, flames licking logs with subdued crackle, tea service trembling on the side table. Theo hovered, then excused himself to the kitchen, leaving the women to the air's thickening weight. Clara spoke first, words measured as drops from a faucet. "I kept one letter. The first. Read it 100 times, hating myself each one." She rose, retrieving a lacquered box from the mantel, lifting the lid to reveal the envelope. Yellowed, intact, Evelyn's youthful script proclaiming to my Riley, light of the low country. Evelyn's breath hitched, fingers hovering as if the paper might dissolve. "Why show me now?" she asked, voice athread. Clara's eyes met hers, watery but direct. "Because holding it poisoned us all. Your words. They were beautiful. Pure. I should have let them be." Riley, silent till then, leaned forward. "Mama, why didn't you fight him?" The question hung raw as exposed root. Clara's shoulders slumped, the shawl slipping. Fear, child. Of losing him, of the town talking, of God judging. But mostly, of facing what I denied in myself. The confession rippled, a stone in the room still pawned. Clara's own buried longings, glimpsed in youth but smothered by convention. Evelyn listened, the fire's warmth a counter to the chill of comprehension. Anger flickered. "How dare you play arbiter of our hearts?" But empathy followed unbidden, a tide she couldn't stem. This woman, complicit in their severance, was no villain but a casualty. Her life a ledger of sacrifices. "I forgive you," Evelyn said at last, the words surprising her with their lightness, like shedding sodden coat. "Not for you. For me. To stop carrying the burn." Clara wept then, softly, handkerchief to lips, and Riley bridged them, arms encircling both, the trio of fragile trinity in the firelight. Theo returned with pecan pie, slicing it with ceremony, the sweetness cutting the salt of tears. Stories flowed, harmless anecdotes of Harlan's gruff affections, Evelyn's archived triumphs, Riley's Atlanta victories, laughter threading through like sunlight on water. As dusk fell, painting the parlor in indigo, Clara pressed the letter into Evelyn's hands. "Keep it. Write a new chapter." The drive to the beach that evening was wordless. Riley's rental car humming along Highway 421, windows down to taste the salt. They parked at Wrightsville, toes sinking into cool sand, the Atlantic sighing as if exhaling old griefs. Riley unfurled a blanket, and they sat shoulder to shoulder, the letter between them like a talisman. "She meant it," Riley said, head on Evelyn's shoulder. "The apology." Evelyn nodded, tracing the envelope's edge. "And I meant mine. Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's space." Moonrise silvered the waves, and in that luminous hush understanding bloomed, not absolution entire, but a clearing of thorns allowing growth. They talked till stars wheeled overhead. Riley's fears of repeating patterns, Evelyn's terror of vulnerability renewed. Kisses followed, slow and certain, sealing pacts with the night's complicity. No rush to define but a mutual vow. To walk this path hand in hand toward whatever light awaited. Back in Portland, the thaw permeated the archive, staff noting the shift in Evelyn's step. The way Riley's name wove into conversations like ivy on trellis. Donors responded to their joint panel on Southern Silences. The room packed with faces hungry for hope. Yet, the true mending was private, nights curled on the couch, Evelyn reading Clara's letter aloud. Its words transmuted from wound to wisdom. Forgiveness, they learned, was iterative, a garden tended daily, weeds pulled with care. As winter solstice neared, Riley broached the future. Over hot cocoa at a Montevilla cafe, snowflakes melting on the panes. "I'm applying for a transfer. Social services here, youth outreach. If you'll have me." Evelyn's heart swelled, full as the river in spate. "We'll build it together. Archive and all." The kiss that followed was promise, warm as hearth, dissolving doubts in its wake. Spring arrived in Portland like a hesitant suitor, crocuses pushing through the thawed earth of February lawns, their purple heads nodding encouragement. For Evelyn and Riley, the season mirrored their rebirth. A gradual unfurling, leaves of trust extending toward sun-dappled skies. The Luminary project flourished under their tandem stewardship, expansions funded by a major grant that allowed for a mobile exhibit van, christened Ashes to Embers, to tour rural outposts where queer stories languished in attics and barns. Riley's transfer came through. Her Atlanta chapter closed with a farewell barbecue where Sam raised a toast to New Horizons, old friends. The move was logistically chaotic, boxes of books and blues records crammed into a U-Haul, but emotionally seamless, Riley slotting into Evelyn's life like a missing volume on the shelf. Their shared home emerged organically, a bungalow in the Hosford Abernethy neighborhood, its gingerbread trim painted sage green to echo Carolina pines. They furnished it collaboratively, Evelyn's archival prints mingling with Riley's folk art pottery, a kitchen island scarred from collaborative cooking sessions, shrimp and grits reimagined with Pacific prawns, laughter seasoning the roux. Mornings began with coffee on the back porch, mugs steaming as robins trilled, conversations meandering from exhibit logistics to the quiet intimacies of cohabitation. "I forgot how good this feels," Riley admitted one dawn, her bare foot nudging Evelyn's under the table. Just being. Evelyn's healing deepened through these rituals, the bungalow a canvas for reinvention. She journaled voraciously, filling leather-bound tomes with reflections on forgiveness, not as endpoint but process, a river carving canyons over time. Clara's letters arrived bi-weekly, missives of mundane miracles, Theo's new baby, a garden blooming with heirloom roses. Riley read them aloud, her voice bridging continents, and Evelyn replied in tandem, words flowing freer now, unburdened by ash. The act mended fissures Evelyn hadn't named, the orphaning not just of love but self. Professionally, synergy sparked innovation. Riley's fieldwork enriched the archive, bringing in oral histories from Oregon's lavender farms and logging camps, voices of women who loved across timberlines. They co-curated Tides of Telling, an installation blending Carolina artifacts with Pacific relics, a digitized map tracing migration routes of queer Southerners westward, pins marking Wilmington to Portland like connective tissue. Opening night drew a crowd, activists, academics, everyday seekers, the air electric with shared resonance. As Evelyn emceed, Riley's proud gaze from the wings felt like ballast, steadying her against stage fright's swell. Yet rebirth wasn't linear. Shadows lingered, demanding vigilance. Riley's nightmares resurfaced in April, triggered by a donor's tale of parental disownment, waking her in sweats with visions of Harlan's silhouette. Evelyn learned the dance of solace, warm milk and back rubs, whispered affirmations till dawn's light filtered through curtains like forgiveness renewed. In turn, Evelyn's doubts surfaced during a solo trip to Cannon Beach for a writing retreat, the isolation amplifying echoes of abandonment. Riley drove out unannounced, arriving with wildflowers and a thermos of soup, her presence a reminder. We choose this every day. Intimacy evolved tenderly, a language relearned without haste. Evenings found them on the living room rug, vinyl crooning Joan Baez, bodies mapping familiar yet novel contours, scars from life's skirmishes, freckles like constellations reclaimed. No grand gestures but profundity in the mundane. Riley braiding Evelyn's silver-streaked hair, Evelyn tracing Riley's laugh lines with fingertips, each touch a vow of presence. Love, they discovered, was salvation's quiet engine, not erasing pain, but transmuting it into fuel for flight. Community enveloped them, a chosen family blooming like the backyard lilacs. Lena hosted potlucks, her gumbo a nod to shared Southern ghosts. Theo visited in June, baby in arms, his awe at the archive palpable. This is what Dad couldn't see, culminating in a family barbecue where grills smoked and stories swapped like cards. Clara flew north in July, her first plane ride, landing wide-eyed at PDX. The bungalow tour ended in tears and hugs, Clara pressing a quilt into Evelyn's arms, stitched from Riley's childhood linens, threads of past woven into future. Evelyn's personal renaissance crested in August, during a solo hike in the Columbia River Gorge, mist rising from basaltic cliffs like spirits ascending. At Wakena Falls, water thundering in silver veils, she scattered petals from a pressed wildflower, symbols of Wilmington summers, into the cascade, a ritual of release. I am whole, she affirmed to the roaring void, the words echoing back amplified. Returning, she surprised Riley with a tattoo, A small lighthouse on her wrist, beam arcing toward infinity. My guide, she explained, as Riley's fingers traced the fresh ink, eyes misting. Riley's transformation paralleled, her advocacy expanding to policy work, lobbying for inclusive curricula in Oregon schools. A speech at the state capitol, voice steady as oak, marked her arrival. We are not footnotes. We are the narrative. Evelyn watched from the gallery, pride swelling like tide, their eyes meeting in silent celebration. Privately, Riley journaled letters to young Theo, her nephew not brother, imprinting lessons of openness, countering Harlan's legacy with ink unburnable. Challenges arose, testing resilience. A vandalized exhibit van in rural Idaho, slurs spray-painted like venom, forcing a media storm. Evelyn navigated with Riley's counsel. Funding dips in fall tested patience, but they weathered. Grant writing by firelight, faith in the project's pulse unwavering. Through it, their bond fortified. Disagreements aired like laundry on the line, resolved with walks along the Willamette, where willows wept approval. By autumn's turn, Evelyn stood transformed, the woman who once curated absences now authoring abundance. The bungalow's walls held photos. Them at the beach, arms linked against wind. Clara and Theo at Thanksgiving table groaning with harvest. Love had not erased scars but adorned them, like vines on ruins blooming defiant. Rebirth, Evelyn realized, was not arrival but perpetual becoming. A horizon ever receding, inviting pursuit. As leaves turned amber, they planned a return to Wilmington, not as pilgrims to pain but architects of legacy. A luminary satellite in the old shipyard, stories rising from the very soil of severance. Hand in hand they faced the mirror, reflections intertwined, silver and chestnut, green and blue. A portrait of renewal, etched in light. The summer of 2026 dawned luminous over Wilmington, the Atlantic's breath stirring palmettos into a verdant hush, as if the low country itself conspired in their homecoming. Evelyn and Riley arrived by train from Portland, the rhythmic clack of rails a lullaby syncing with their pulses, suitcases packed not with baggage but blueprints, sketches for the luminary's coastal outpost, a pavilion of glass and reclaimed driftwood rising from the shipyard's edge. Harlan's empire had crumbled to echoes, the yard now a mix of artisan studios and eco-tours, but the bluff remained, its vista unchanged. River meeting sea in eternal dialogue. Clara greeted them at the station, frilier but radiant, a straw hat perched jauntily on silver curls, her embrace encompassing both women like a benediction long overdue. My girls, she murmured, the endearment a bridge across chasms. Theo and his family followed in a caravan, the baby now toddling with gleeful abandon, his chubby hands clutching a toy lighthouse, a gift from Aunt Riley that symbolized more than whimsy. The family luncheon sprawled across the veranda, platters of she-crab soup and cornbread yielding to laughter that rippled like sunlight on water, stories orbiting the table like fireflies at dusk. Evelyn felt the land's pull, not as anchor but invitation. The marshes whisper a chorus of homecomings, magnolias unfurling petals in quiet ovation. With Riley beside her, the once hostile terrain softened, paths once trodden in solitude now shared. They wandered the dunes at twilight, barefoot in the surf's froth, the pavilion's foundation already staked, a promise etched in sand. Here, Riley said, pausing where they had once kissed under stars, we'll build the light we lost. Evelyn leaned into her, the horizon vast and benevolent. We never lost it, just lent it to the dark. The outpost's groundbreaking was a modest affair, soil turned under a sky of unblemished blue, locals mingling with out-of-state donors, fisherfolk with calloused hands, academics in linen suits, queer elders whose eyes gleamed with recognition. Evelyn spoke first, voice carrying over the inlet's murmur. This is for the letters burned, the loves unspoken. A repository not of ruin but radiance. Riley followed, her words a social worker's creed. Stories heal when shared. Let this be our collective exhale. Clara broke ground with a silver trowel, her grip steady, tears carving paths of peace. Theo hoisted his son high, the child's gurgle a benediction. Portland awaited their return, the bungalow a hearth aglow with autumn's first chill, but Wilmington lingered in their veins. A chapter closed with grace, not finality. Back west, the luminary expanded, ashes to embers touring the Appalachians, unearthing diaries from holler cabins, voices rising like mist from valleys. Evelyn and Riley co-authored a chapbook, From Fire to Flame, vignettes blending their entwined narratives with anonymous submissions, prose poetic, laced with light's insistence. Life's cadence settled into harmony. Mornings of yoga on the porch, bodies flowing in tandem. Evenings of board games with Lena and Theo's ilk. Raucous bids over Monopoly properties mirroring their stakes in joy. Intimacy deepened, a river widening to estuary. Nights of whispered dreams, days of purposeful touch. Love's language fluent now in vulnerability. Challenges came. Riley's grant rejection, Evelyn's flare of old doubts, but they met them as partners, tools sharpened by trial. Therapy sessions laced with humor, retreats to the coast where waves schooled them in persistence. Clara visited biannually, her quilt adorning the bungalow's bed, threads binding generations. In her letters, wisdom flowered. Forgiveness is the garden we tend together. Theo's family grew, holidays a mosaic of traditions. Carolina lowcountry boil yielding to Oregon clam chowder, toasts to Harlan's better angels. The baby little Elias toddled through the archive, fingers sticky on fragile pages, his innocence a reminder. Legacy is carried forward, not chained backward. Evelyn's 40th birthday fell on an equinox, balance's cusp, celebrated with a lantern release in Forest Park, paper vessels borne aloft by flames, symbols ascending like prayers answered. Riley's gift was a locket, engraved with their initials intertwined, holding a speck of Carolina sand. "For the girl who swam with me," she whispered, fastening it at Evelyn's nape. Tears fell, but joyful, the circle complete. As years layered like sedimentary rock, their story rippled outward. Inspirations for films, invitations to TED stages, a foundation seeded from luminary proceeds for youth sanctuaries. Yet the heart remained intimate. Hands clasped on bridge walks, the Willamettes flow a metaphor for endurance. Love, they affirmed, was redemption's quiet alchemy, transfiguring pain to purpose, shadows to shade. In quiet moments, Evelyn traced the tattoo on her wrist, its beam eternal and new. The archive she built healed not just others, but the woman who dared to love amid flames. Riley found her there, in the stacks of reclaimed light, and together, they illuminated the path ahead, warm, hopeful, a horizon boundless with grace.